At this point, we're going to end at 12:30. Yep, you're on. You're good. Get them down. You good with the screen? Yeah. All right.
All right. How 3D is your web? Presented by me. So thinking outside the box. A while ago, a few new CSS properties became available to early adopting browsers. By the way, I'm kind of hungry, so I'm going to try to get to this as quick as possible. So I know you guys probably are too. There's perspective, transform style. Perspective is probably what I consider one of the most important ones. You can rotate, skew, do all these sort of things to these elements using these new properties. But without your perspective, you really don't have much depth. So the property is controlled through a pixel value. The higher the value is, define a perspective depth. The greater the depth itself. Or is it the other way around? Sorry. The lower the value means the greater perspective skewing. The transform property, these properties each manipulate an element's face by method over all axes. I don't know if that is spelled correct. I went back and forth on that a couple times. So you got skew by X and Y, which will stretch the corners and or edges. You've got the rotate by X, Y, Z, and 3D. 3D is kind of like an optimized version of all three axes combined, so it's a little bit more friendly on the GPU, I believe. And then we got translate, which just kind of moves from point A to point B. So if we were to use these properties, let's say on some children that are within a parent, right? And we rotate, skew, turn these guys a little bit. Whoa. What does that mean? Okay. So if you manipulate these children within a parent, you have these two properties, these transform styles that you can apply to the parent itself so that the children adhere to these properties that you've given it to, so that if you rotate the parent, you can still preserve the 3D itself. So you have a flat and a preserved 3D. So the parent itself is being rotated. The children have been manipulated within local space of the parent. There's a lot more properties. I'm pretty sure my fellow feds are like, you're missing some. But we're going to just kind of talk about those important ones. So with all of that, what does this mean? It means that we're busted. I don't know. Hold on, guys.
Are you plugged directly in?
I should be.
Do you have the cable? No, you're plugged in.
Hold on. What's the hotkey to unfold screen? There we go.
11. There's supposed to be a lot more there.
Let's go to Fed. It's all right, we have a backup.
Oh, here.
Yeah, give me my. I'm on wireless, that's why. Wait for it.
Was the other one you were looking at, was it local? Or
It was local, yeah. There we go. Hopefully, we'll see. Rather not. I'd rather just this thing go away. Anybody? Trying. I don't think my gestures are picking up. There we go. Okay. Let's get back here. So what does this mean? Fingers crossed. We have a new world of possibilities. That butterfly was really awesome to build. I'll point that out. So basically what we're using here is just a lot of imagery that we found on Google, just some basic imagery. Some planes using the 3D transform, all within a parent that we set to preserve 3D, and we're rotating. We're using some additional features in CSS, such as the keyframe animations, so that we can manipulate the butterfly to move from point A to point B to point C to point D, and then back again, and then have an additional layer of flapping its wings while doing so. If you look really, really closely, all these planes, the grass, the trees, are moving within a skew axis so that it has wind. It's very subtle and probably doesn't work as well. And then, of course, I couldn't do without the iSight Design Tech Summit 2014, which was awesome. One really cool thing is that this is using a little bit of JavaScript to randomly place the grass that grows and the trees. So every time you refresh, they'll be put in a new position, whereas the water well and the signs are not. The reason I wanted to do that, and I didn't have actually time to do this, is because this means I have the ability to actually pinpoint the different vertice points on these planes in world space. So if I can actually, at real time, find these points in space and tell me back those points in space, we can do away with a lot of this flickering you see through a Z buffer, basically. We have Z buffering ability within a set interval. But again, I didn't have time to set that up. But it is something that is sorely lacking in this. So knowing our limits. Like any kind of environment, web is limited in a number of ways. Environment size, design requirements, content types, amounts, and length. So no surprise, most of our development time is spent around how best to display content within the limitations we put before it. For example, content deemed important enough to be on the page, but not important enough to be displayed at all times. That would describe a tooltip. That's development time that we took to design a tooltip for content that wasn't deemed important enough to be displayed at all times. Another one is tabbed-based content, breaking down content in smaller parts that won't take up a lot of 2D real estate and screen space. That's another a lot of time spent in development around trying to fit more content into a page. And there might have been a better approach about how we divided that content up or distributed over pages maybe. And then my favorite, the endless amounts of content anywhere. Oh my God, help. Why are you rotating? That's an interesting concept. That's an interesting concept.
A rotating film strip.
You'll notice that we spend a lot of time writing these requirements for these rotators that are, again, we're trying to fit all this 2D content or just content itself into a much smaller section on a page for whatever reason. But if you notice, typically when they go live, they don't have endless amounts of content in them. There's only a couple items in them, and all that time was spent developing it. So these solutions work because they fit within the limitations, but most importantly, they capture a medium, what I call the creative versus practicality spectrum. All right, so they're, I'm talking kind of down on those solutions, but they work. They're battle tested, and they meet this happy medium. So what spectrum am I talking about? Design with limits. So the creativity and practicality spectrum is kind of what we approach. We don't really talk about it, but what we approach whenever we have a problem in sort of web development itself or 2D layout. And that is how creative can we go, which is the left image, and how practical can we go, which is the right image, right? So this is the same page, right? So the designer had decided to turn this site into a very, very heavy creativity end website. So what happens 9 times out of 10 is you get a mystery meat website. You have no idea how to navigate this website. You're going to have to take time to remember what these little image pieces are to get back to where you want to be, or you just give up. And then the other end of that is complete practicality, which is no creativity, is boring. I mean, it's just a bunch of blue links, and you get nowhere. So as we explore these new 3D transforms, and as Cam was saying, maybe we should mix the two. We got to really keep this in mind, this creativity and practicality balance, because all too often you'll start to see these 3D properties being adopted in ways that are just either fluff, they don't do anything for the experience itself, or it's just turns the solution completely creativity heavy, and you don't know how to use it. which is always bad. So again, as we begin to adopt CD or CSS transforms more and 3D aspects into our solutions, we must continue to respect our limitations, but also the creativity and practicality spectrum. So I know there's going to be some really cool things out there about these properties in the next few years, but how much of that influences our way we approach content delivery is up to us. We can invest our time using these to come up with better, more delightful solutions, and I use that word heavily, solutions, UX solutions, or we could use it to spin hover buttons better.
Email links.
No, no. So my topic, was kind of fast, and we got 10 minutes left. Is there any questions? As soon as you build that, Cam. I believe I don't think there is a translate on Z. I was looking at that up before I got up here because it's just scale. Okay, yeah, scale. Ooh. No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
It looked like it was just a scalar solution for A5 transformation, so everything except that last slice on the rotate, which was
On this guy, the terrain one.
no. Sorry. But I did have a question about that. How big do you have to make your advanced or
Oh, these are down to 32 up to 64 by 64. Yes, they are. Unatlased or sprited in WebSense. The flickering really bothered me, and I tried to make some time to get rid of that, but not much you can do. Questions? Yeah.
What's the, how does it scale? Like old PCs to new PCs, hardware-wise, how crazy can you get? How easy is it to all of a sudden, be eating up 100% CPU because you forgot to close something or something stupid like that? And is there safety limits built in, or do you have to invoke those yourself and stuff like that?
Next question? Yeah.
So what about a fallback in that case where somebody's rocking the IE6 and you just say, put text up that says, imagine a spinning field with a butterfly and
No.
opt out?
Yeah, you can. The fallback is, it's this new technology. This is new properties. They've been out since 9, obviously, so going forth in IE will get better. But yeah, the fallback really comes down to the UX and the designer and the developer itself as to what they want to portray the message is. Like, hey, get a new browser. Or, right, yeah. Now, also, let me also voice that, in no way, because this is CSS 3D HTML transform, is this superior to WebGL at all? WebGL, that is, I'm saying that right. Yeah, okay. WebGL, it's kind of like opening up a black hole to your GPU on a web page itself, whereas this is actually using native HTML elements and CSS properties to transform everything. WebGL is a lot more in touch with the GPU and a lot more in depth as far as shaders, performance.
That was my question. Do you know if that supports hardware 3D at all, or is that all browser software rendering?
So the properties that it's using right now actually touch into the GPU slightly for things like scale. Like when the grass grows, we're using scale, which I believe is leaning into the GPU a little bit more. Alex, is that correct?
I'm not sure about scale, but I know that when you start dealing with a 3D plane, it kicks in the GPU. That's what
Yeah. Yeah. So both methods are attempting to touch the GPU itself. Just one's been around a little bit longer and it's a little bit more superior. Yeah, you can. Yeah. Well, without Crash the Machine? No. Jeez, man, you're going some. No, there is blur properties. There's a lot of cool properties out there. It's just I didn't have time to throw them all in there. And with blur on this, I think it would explode. So again, you have to be very nimble when you're using these solutions because they're new. And again, it's not as superior to WebGL, but it's freaking cool what you can do with it. Yeah. So this talk mainly was about trying to utilize these solutions in a manner that we could harness real solutions. Up to now, I mean, Jeremiah, correct me if I'm wrong, we've been using these solutions for kind of, I don't want to use the word fluff, but additions, some nice enhancements to the delight. There you go. To delight the solutions that we're already using. But I personally, I mean, I'm not up here advocating that I know the answers to those solutions or what those solutions are, but I really do feel that there's some hidden solutions within these properties that we could completely flip our solutions that we use right now on the head and come up with something amazing.
So a quick question. Okay. That wasn't my question. So we had a guy come into our office. We had a party event, and he had all these GoPro cameras duct taped together, and he was launching a drone to go shoot 3D video. And I'm curious, when you look at this as a browser viewer for 3D content, you talk about the latitude, longitude, coordinates, and so forth that come in to be able to essentially plot it. Could you take, let's say, Mount Hood Meadows as an example, wanting to have a dynamic ski map in a drone that they have fly the runs, and then extrapolate that into something like, is there a correlation to video, and is that a logical way to gather, I guess, the content that you would then use through this engine?
Right. In that context, I wouldn't say the video would be the best solution. And again, if you're looking at this terrain right here, ideally I would have liked to have some sort of topology to that terrain. So it's lifted and lowered a little bit. But we're not there quite yet with these. Everything is being rendered in sort of a degree-based, turned in degrees, whereas world coordinates and stuff that we plot from like 3D applications are based in a completely different sort of value itself. But I have been working on a pipeline that will turn, I told Al about this, that will turn anything from a 3D application into degrees based on the vertice points that I was talking about that we use for Z-buffering. So in that sense, what I would do is I would probably go to Mount Hood Meadows itself in a satellite, and I would rip the height map data from that, bring it into a 3D app, lower the poly count if it needed to be, and then translate those object points in space into 3D space here. So yes, it's possible, but it would be a little bit of work.
Just real quick follow-up to that, sorry, Christoph. So with Meadows, what's really interesting about this to me is it's all navigable, right? Word. And so when you have this content that gets pulled in, like let's say they're run maps, you're able to essentially go and pan and click and explore new content and have all the layers of content that comes through. So with what you're talking about, we could have this be all navigable with the content in a 3D kind of overlay, and you don't need any plugins or anything, it just runs.
Yeah, correct. We could actually set the different points in space that we would like to fly and look at in CSS keyframes, and we can actually hear that just like a body class or something. And as the person flips through different points, they're being flying to different points in space. So yeah, I mean it's possible. It's a lot of work, and that's why it's less superior than WebGL. But WebGL is kind of like a black hole. We're advancing it still, but it's like opening up an iframe in your page, and you're working with a whole different code set. Whereas this, all the feds already know how to use this.
Just thanks, Paul. To that point, the sort of the application that Paul is asking about, the barriers of that you mentioned aside, that seems to me like it would be better done as an application in something like WebGL or SVG or something like that, rather than using using HTML elements.
Yes, I mean depending on the requirements. I mean if they're wanting full-on specular lighting and bump mapping from the snow, and it just looks photorealistic, then yes, WebGL is going to be the way to go. But if you want something light and simple, you don't even have to do sky backgrounds, just a simple polygon mountain that has some points with some information that you want to fly to. I mean, you could do it in here, no problem.
This is why you were freaking out on me on IM the other day that you could do polygons.
I'm telling you, man, if you don't push your limitations, how are you going to advance?
Okay, so that's our last session for today. So before everybody takes off, I have a big favor to ask. Actually, it's a very small favor. We have a Sitecore meetup in here tonight, and we're expecting 40-plus people. So I need help getting all the tables down and getting some more chairs out so we've got big rows. And then you are all free to go feed your faces at that point. Thank you so much. We will meet back here at about 8:45 tomorrow morning.